Welcome to Celebrate a Sister podcast. I'm your host, Emma Walkinshaw. I'm a transformational coach. I'm also the founder of Embody Me program and the creator of 21 Minutes of Morning Magic. You may also find me on the yoga mat leading yoga sessions and also running retreats here in Australia and internationally. Here on the podcast, I bring you some pretty incredible guests. We talk all things self-belief, body acceptance, personal development, outdated beauty standards, and we also call BS on the toxic diet culture, accepting the beautiful bodies we were born into, letting go of all the beliefs, and raising our self-awareness. I also come to you from time to time with a little solo episode, a little Life According to Emma moment. I'm so glad you're here. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Celebrate a Sister. This week I have a very special guest. Mel is actually a dear friend of mine. So today I'm chatting with Mel Kettle, who is a leadership communication strategist who helps leaders and teams strengthen their relationships at work and home through real connection and sustained engagement. Mel has been in business for 17 years and has worked with hundreds of leaders who want to lead themselves, their teams, and their culture so that everyone can thrive, align, and belong. More recently, Mel has grappled with insecurities and confusion brought on by perimenopause. She reassures us that life does get better once you're through this phase. Today, Mel lives on the beautiful Sunshine Coast, enjoying a life that she truly loves. Mel's also an author. Her book is titled Fully Connected, and it's an Amazon bestseller. And it's for leaders who are fed up with being pulled in many directions. It provides simple strategies to help leaders take back ownership of their lives and reclaim their health and energy. Welcome, Mel.
Thanks so much, Emma. It's so good to be here.
Wonderful. Now, there's quite a few things in your bio that I do want to chat about today. And yes, your book is brilliant and got lots of great little exercises and tips in it. I really enjoyed your book. So thanks, Mel, for taking time to write a book because I know it's no mean feat.
I know you know that because yours has just come out and I'm so excited about it.
Yes, it's when you write a book, you really then appreciate what someone's gone through and the process, my goodness, but it is worth it. And your book particularly, I mean, an Amazon bestseller. Did you anticipate that was going to happen?
I really hoped it would, and I did everything within my power to make it happen. So when it did, I was very grateful. What I didn't expect is that it would become a bestseller in the very broad business category. And so that was a massive thrill for me that day.
Yeah, so good because it is business and personal. But, there is that saying too that I love to say, which, we are our business. So the more you work on yourself, the more you work on your business. It's one and of the same, I think, when you're an entrepreneur. Would you agree?
Oh, I really do. And a lot of the people I work with, particularly the women I work with, it doesn't matter whether they are working for themselves or working for somebody else. The way that the world works today, and we discovered this more through COVID, is that home and work are so much more linked today than ever before. And, I know a lot of people talk about work-life balance, but I've always talked about having a work-life integration because there's always personal things that you need to do when you're at work, and there's always work-related things that happen when you're at home, even if it's just thinking about what you're doing tomorrow or grappling with an issue at work when you're at home or when you're trying to sleep at night or, when you're washing up the breakfast dishes, whatever that might be.
Yeah, it is. And I think you're right. I know that in my husband's company, our town planning, we really strive to talk about flexibility with our team because they've all got families. but really from a place of honesty, not just a throwaway because we're doing the right thing, we're ticking a box, to actually say we are genuinely flexible. Talk to us because you have a life. And I know that at the end of the day, when people are happy, that flows on in their work. It just does.
It's not only from your experience, but there's research that shows when people are happy at work, they're much more engaged, they're much more productive, they achieve more. And if you work with other people, then that happiness lifts up the people around you, whether it's your colleagues or your clients or your customers. And think about the people that you interact with during the course of a day in their workplaces, whether it's the barista who makes you a coffee, or whether it's the checkout person at the supermarket, or whether it's somebody, your dentist or a doctor, or any one of the other many, many people that we engage with on a regular basis. If they're not happy, it's obvious, isn't it? So how does that make you feel when you're doing business with someone who's obviously unhappy? So just think about that in terms of your workplace. Are you happy at work? And are your people happy at work? And if they're not, then what are you going to do about that?
Actually, Mel, can you share some specific strategies or steps that can help overcome challenges? If there is someone in the workplace and it's about leadership and communication in the workplace, are there any specific strategies that you can share to help?
Oh, so many, but let's continue on the theme of being happy at work. And one of the things that we know makes people happy at work is when they understand what their role in the organisation is in terms of helping the organisation achieve its overarching goal. So if you're in an organisation that either doesn't have a clear vision or a clear direction, or if you're in an organisation that might have a clear vision and direction but nobody knows what it is, then that's going to be really difficult for your staff, because they're not going to understand how their role feeds into the greater good. Because as humans, we all want to be a part of something that's bigger than we are, because that helps give us a sense of purpose and value in the world. So the first thing is, and one of the first things that often derails an organisation is when there's no clarity around what you're there for. The second thing is you might have that clarity, but how are you communicating it? Poor communication across a workplace is one of the biggest costs in workplaces today. There was some research that came out a few years ago that said the average office worker in Australia spends 1 day a week on email. That is ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they spend another day a week trying to figure out what they're supposed to do because of the mixed messages that they receive through poor communication from their superiors or their colleagues. So they're just two really simple examples of the cost of poor communication. But then think about in your workplace and in your experience, when people haven't communicated clearly with you, how does that make you feel? Does that make you feel that there's a secret being held? Does that make you feel that you're not a part of the inner circle so you can't know? Does that make you feel like there's things happening that could have a negative impact on your job in the organisation or in the future of the organisation? And then how does that impact on your ability to do your job well?
Yeah. And when you're saying that too, Mel, even just that feeling of being on edge, because when clear communication isn't there, being on edge, and like you say, those examples of, is there an inner circle or a loop that I'm not involved in? Am I on the out? And what if I don't get it right, but I'm not really sure what I meant to do? So it is a knock-on effect, really.
It is.
That poor communication.
It is. And think about who makes up your workforce. I've worked in workforces before where the majority of the people in the organisation have been on a contract or have been casual. And particularly for those of us who were on a contract, our contract finished on, let's just say, the 30th of June. I think that's when it was. And probably 80% of the workforce had a contract that was due to finish on the 30th of June. On the 1st of June, none of us knew what was happening with our contract. We were in the public service, and so most of us had other jobs that we could return to. Most of us didn't want to, or a lot of us didn't want to, but we were getting pressured from our bosses to say what's happening, and we just didn't know. And so I don't think I found out what was happening with my contract until about the 20th of June. And luckily for me, mine was rolled over, and so were most people's. But what if they weren't?
Yeah.
And so you can just imagine during that month of not knowing, and even in the lead up to that month, there was a lot of energy and a lot of time and a lot of attention that was being spent on what's going to happen if my contract doesn't get rolled over, rather than the project that we were supposed to be working on that had big deadlines of around the 30th of June.
And just the not feeling safe from a financial perspective. People have mortgages and obligations. Everybody does.
Yeah.
And just the sheer fact of that, being concerned, well, if I don't look for another position now, just in case, it's almost like, smoke and mirrors, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
You don't know what's happening.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I knew for my personal circumstance, I had another job. I was a permanent public servant, and so I was going to get paid regardless of where I was. But it wasn't about just the money. It was about would I still enjoy the job that I was doing? Where would I be working? Where would I be going on the 1st of July?
Yeah.
But think about, I know my husband had done a lot of contracting work over the years, and he would often not get confirmation about whether a contract was renewing or not until 2 or 3 days before. And I would say to him, you need to be looking for another contract or another job. And he would say, well, I don't want to look until I know. And I'm like, that's not a very healthy, that's not good for our mortgage or our bills.
Or your nervous system.
Yeah.
Not great for your nervous system. Everyone's involved, the ripple effect in the home.
I know. And, he'd come home and he'd say, stop asking me. And I'd say, well, why aren't you asking? Why aren't they telling you?
Yeah.
It was really, so just the flow-on effect is huge when you have poor communication around that kind of thing. But just think about, what else is happening in your organisation. Change is rife at the moment, and it usually always is in organisations to some level. But how much of the change do your people know about, and how much are you communicating with them?
Yeah.
And how much are you telling people the truth or versus hiding the truth? So one of my clients is going through a massive change program at the moment, which is reliant on external things happening that they don't know about. And so her communication to her staff is really clear. It's, you all know this is happening. It's a sector-wide change. You all know this is happening. This is what I can tell you. I don't know anything else.
Yeah. Clear is kind.
It is. Yeah. And good old Brene Brown, love Brene and she says clear is kind. And it really is. And she said, I know it's frustrating, but I don't know either. And I'm frustrated as well. So if there's things that you can't communicate because you don't know, then just be honest about it.
Yeah, yeah. And then that stops too the constant asking and you making up or dancing around the issue, just telling the truth, like you say. That's good advice.
The other thing is another client of mine was a bank, and they were going through a merger with another bank, and they had an all staff or a team, all leaders meeting, and he did a little Ask Me Anything segment. And I said to him, are you really sure you want them to ask you anything? And he went, yep. And he had a couple of questions about the merger, and he said, I can't tell you. Legally, I'm obliged to not tell you. Legally, I can't tell you what's going on, because if, word gets out that I've told you things, then the whole deal can be off. Yeah. But he said, what I will commit to do is to give you an update on this date. And so he gave a date, 3, 4, 5 weeks in the future after the next board meeting, and said, I'll give you an update where we're at after the next board meeting on this date. And he said, I can't promise I'll be able to tell you anything more than I can tell you today, which isn't very much, but I will update you on that date.
That's a great way of communicating, giving a line in the sand. We will discuss this on this date. Even if I've got nothing more, I am going to discuss this on this date. That is helpful. That's helpful communication.
Exactly.
Like, because people like to know a date. We like to know.
They do. And he said, if I've got something to tell you, then I'll call a meeting, like an all-staff meeting, and we'll do it over Zoom and I'll tell you all together. And if I have nothing to tell you, I'll just send you all an email.
Yeah.
And I'll give you the next date when I think I might have news.
Yeah, that's great communication. Good tips. I'll have to remember all of these now. Now, I wanted to talk about, because it's definitely stage of life I'm at, and there is lots around it now, which is wonderful, which is the perimenopause, the menopause. So navigating perimenopause can be challenging at times for women, without a doubt. How do you manage the insecurity and confusion during this phase? And what advice do you have for women leaders going through similar experiences? Because like you've assured us, when you pop out the other side, it is good news.
Oh my God, it's so good to be through it.
So what's your tips for women leaders who are going through this literally, remember they used to call it years ago, change of life? It is a change of life.
I think like any time when we're feeling anxious or insecure or confused, find someone to talk to. If there's things happening in your body that are causing you confusion or concern or feelings of isolation, talk to someone who you trust. And if there's physical symptoms or emotional symptoms that you're worried about, then talk to a healthcare professional. If you don't have a doctor, so I went through menopause when I was in my early 40s. I started going through it. I came off the pill when I was 42. I'd been on it forever. And I gained 10 kilos in 10 weeks. I started being really forgetful. I had a whole lot of other things physically that started happening and mentally that started happening. I started becoming forgetful, extremely anxious, and just it was a total shit show. I thought I was getting early onset dementia. And I went to my doctor and she was particularly unhelpful. She said to me, you're just eating too much, which is why you've gained so much weight. Wouldn't even acknowledge that it could be perimenopause because I was too young in her mind. I was 42 or 43. And she said, my average patient who goes through menopause is 52. Come back when you're 52 and I'll give you HRT. Well, I was all done and dusted by 48. So if I'd waited until I was 52, it was just going to be way too late. So I did some research to find out what was going on. But today, like that was 12 years ago, today there's so much more information available. So find a good doctor who understands what a midlife woman's body is all about. And if you don't have a doctor that you believe is going to be helpful, the Australasian Menopause Society has a directory of doctors in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada that you can go to and find. And you can plug in your postcode and it will give you a list of who is in your general area that you can talk to. The other thing to find someone to talk about is somebody at work. If you feel like your menopausal symptoms are impacting on how you do your job and you work for somebody else, then have a chat with your head of HR, have a chat with your boss, have a chat with colleagues, because there are a lot of organisations now who recognise that 20% of the workforce in general in Australia are women going through perimenopause. And so there's an enormous number of organisations who are doing things that are very useful and helpful in organisations today. So have a chat with them and just see if you need to have some accommodations made for you, if you need to be working at home more, if there's things in your work environment that are having a negative impact, whether it's the temperature in the office or whether it's the times of day you have meetings and you're required to use your brain, whether it's the fabric in the uniform that you have to wear. Talk to people in your workplace who can make a difference and who can provide you with the support that you need.
That's great, Mel. And I love that there is that. What was it called? I'm going to put the link in the show notes. What was it called? The
It's
menopause.
the Australasian Menopause Society. I'll send you the link so that you can pop it in.
Pop in the show notes. Yeah, that's awesome. Because one thing that I have really been happy about is so much information is coming out now. And, years ago, and I'm going to speak from my own experience, listening to my mother and that generation don't take HRT because all of these, things are going to happen. And then so much studies come out now that it's not true. And the study was not done on lots of women. It was done on a very small amount of women. Yeah. So it's been great that things have progressed there because, if HRT is an option, what a great option to help with all of those things, all of the symptoms that come. But there's also navigating that too and knowing that that's not necessarily always going to be the fix. You've got some other, I guess you could say, adjustments that can be made in the workplace to help with that.
And don't just forget work as well. Think about at home. What's your home life? Do you have a partner? Do you have kids? If you've got a partner, talk about it with them. I was very open about it with my partner, and thank goodness I was, because I was angry a lot. And he got to the point of saying to me, "Are you angry at me because I've done something, or is it your hormones?" And I would normally, just sort of grit my teeth and go, "It's my fucking hormones." So and he'd be like, "Okay, I'll just back away." Or he'd say, "Can I give you a glass of wine?" Which alcohol is not good for menopause, unfortunately, but, it helps with some of it, at least mentally.
Yeah, what do you need? Wine, chocolate, a cuddle? What do you need? Some alone time?
Exactly. Give me a cuddle. And you can have the whole tuna. I don't need it.
My husband actually I listened to a tremendous podcast, and my husband listened to the podcast because I said to him, "Have a listen." And he said, "Oh, I understand that now."
Yeah.
Which was great. Just that whole education to be, forewarned is to be forearmed, which is wonderful.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
he then understood it and then goes, "Oh, I can now see how this is impacting you." Yeah, great.
And it's the same with your kids, talk to your kids about it, particularly in an age appropriate way. And, if you've got teenagers or tweens, then you can talk about it in terms of, about puberty. Well, mummy's going through reverse puberty. And how sometimes you just feel really emotional for reasons that you don't understand. Well, mummy, I feel the same. Mm-hmm. And so because that will help ease tensions in the family even more.
Yeah. And it's almost back to the start of our conversation, communication.
Exactly.
Communication is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. That's it.
So, yes, the menopause is real. But when you come through it, Mel, so what are we to look forward to? So any woman who's listening to this and is perhaps right in the thick of it, what is to look forward to on the other end?
So no periods, obviously. That was a big one for me. One of the symptoms that really shocked me when I was going through perimenopause was extreme anxiety. And that I'd never been an anxious person, and that was so unexpectedly horrific for me that to not have that has just been the biggest relief ever. Mm. But, if and I believed that HRT was bad, and so I didn't take it, and I really regret that now.
Yeah.
So find a good doctor and, talk about all the options for you, because you don't need to put up with all of the negativity that you're feeling or that you're going through. It's natural, but it doesn't need to be your normal.
Yeah. I am on board with the HRT. I've been taking a bioidentical HRT. Yeah. I've got a fabulous menopause clinic here on the Gold Coast, which has been phenomenal. And my biggest improvement for me, it was energy. Yes. I've always been an endless energy person, like an Energizer battery. And then going through the perimenopause, and now I'm postmenopause, I was like, where has my energy gone? It just left. And then going to this menopause clinic, the bioidentical HRT has been phenomenal, and my energy is back. And for me, it feels like the old Emma is back.
Oh, so good. I feel the same. Yeah. I think I averaged about 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night
Yeah.
for probably about 7 or 8 years.
Ooh.
And now I'm getting a regular 8 hours a night. And the difference that that's making is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I'm also
And that,
going to bed earlier. So I'm spending more hours in bed to get that time, but I'm not waking up in hot sweats or having hot flushes or, my mind isn't racing as much as it was
yeah.
all
Wonderful.
those years ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So any women, I mean, do your own research, of course, but HRT could be the answer or could not be. It's up to you. But I would definitely say for me it was life
Yeah.
changing.
It's been life changing for so many of my friends. And it's beautiful to see. And as we talked about before, so many women are talking about their experiences and sharing their experiences, and there's starting to be more research done about it. And there's starting to be, it's starting to be talked about so much more in workplaces and at conferences and not just where there's women. One of the first clients, so I talk a lot about with my clients about menopause in the workplace and what is it that you need to be doing in your workplace to support women who are going through menopause. How do you communicate it? How do you provide resources? What resources do you provide? And then how do you make sure that conversations happen between women and the males in the organisation, the men in the organisation? And one of the first organisations that booked me to come in and speak to their staff was an organisation that's got a workforce made up of 80% men. Because they said we recognise that they need to know.
Yes,
Yeah.
what a gift.
Yeah, it was. It really was.
And like you say, Mel, because it does flow out into their life, I would imagine that 80% males would have mothers, sisters, wives, girlfriends. It's 51% of the population, isn't it? Women. So it's wonderful for them to have an understanding, bit of compassion. Brilliant.
The woman who organised it said at their staff Christmas party that year, which was a couple of months after our event, where partners came as well, there were quite a few wives that came up to her and said, "Thank you for running this event. My husband went to it and I feel like I'm seen. He sees me properly now."
Oh, isn't that beautiful? What a great workplace. That's really, even though I would imagine I'm thinking through people in my life that will go, oh, what's this? How is this going to make us more productive or more efficient? Or how are we going to get more invoices paid? When the truth is, when we all understand each other and cohesive, and back to that communication.
Oh, absolutely. And what was really interesting is we canvassed the staff and said, what are your questions? We did it as a Q&A. Send us through your questions in advance so that we can incorporate them into the presentation. And one of the questions was, everybody has their stuff. Why are we talking about this?
Oh.
And the client said, we can just remove that question. And I said, no, it's a really important question. And I said, everybody does have their stuff. And this is just the one thing that we're talking about today. But I would really hope that by having the conversation about menopause, that it will encourage people to be more open about sharing the other things that are happening in their lives. And so one of the things that they noticed is that there were many more open and honest and difficult conversations around all sorts of things that had previously not been talked about. So starting a conversation around menopause, which is deeply personal for most women, allowed them or gave them the permission to start having conversations around things like grief and cancer and caring for elderly parents and a miscarriage and all of the other messy things that happen in our lives that make up who we are in the workplace.
I would imagine that topic, like you say, it could be many of those things that could start, but someone had to be first. It had to go it had to start somewhere. And you're right, it's deeply personal, but the knock-on effect and opening that door for every other topic to then be discussed, great starting point.
Yeah, it was. And we did it on World Menopause Day or the week of World Menopause Day. And so that was what we said as well. It's World Menopause Day this week, which is why we're talking about menopause. Yeah. We could just as easily have this conversation on a day that recognises prostate cancer or miscarriage or, any other day in the calendar year. But we've chosen this one because there's women who are going through it who would like support and guidance and advice.
Yeah, brilliant. What a very forward-thinking company. So
Fantastic
good.
organization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Now, Mel, I did want to ask you, you have been in business for 17 years and you've worked with hundreds of leaders. From your experience, what are the most common obstacles leaders face in creating a thriving, aligned, and belonging culture? And how can they overcome these obstacles?
So we've talked about a couple of these already, and not having a clear vision and not having a clear focus for the organisation is a big one. Poor communication is obviously another one. And the third one is employees are disengaged. And they're often disengaged because they don't understand the vision or the focus, or because of poor communication, or because of something else that's happening in their life or in the organisation. So they're the three main obstacles that I think a lot of leaders are facing today that are people focused. Obviously, there's economic challenges, there's, a whole lot of other financial aspects that we're not going to talk about here because I'm about people and relationships, not so much about the money. Do like money though. But then how do you overcome it? I think there's a few ways you can overcome these obstacles. And the first is to have a level of self-awareness. The second is to know what motivates you and know what motivates others. And the third is to be prioritizing self-care. So these are all very self things that you need to do. But when you do these three things, you'll be a better person and a better leader, which means that you'll be more inclined to communicate with clarity and with compassion and with consistency, so that people in your organisation can get a better understanding of what you as an individual stand for, and then what the organisation stands for if you're a leader in that organisation. So self-awareness, for example, is having an understanding of what are and if we look at it from an organisational perspective, what are the values of the organisation? What are the priorities of the organisation? And how do you marry those up, or how do they relate to the values and the priorities of that are yours personally? Are they aligned, or is there a mismatch? And if they're aligned, then you're far more likely to be able to communicate those in a way that will bring people on board with you.
I would also imagine, Mel, being a leader, this isn't thinking about communicating the values and the goal of the organisation and also what everyone's going for in the communication. I think of rapport. This doesn't come overnight or in one meeting. This is building that trust. And like the example you gave of the leader in the bank that said, I don't have the answer, but we'll rediscuss it on this date. There's trust in there as well.
Oh, there is.
So I would imagine this is not just holding one meeting once a week. It's all these little building blocks that build this really strong team.
Oh, it really is. And, think about what causes you to trust somebody? So I know there's a few things that lead me to be more inclined to trust somebody. That one is they set off this vibe, very esoteric, but they have this vibe that is either that says you're not dodgy. Yeah. And that vibe comes about because they look you in the eye. They seem to actually listen to you. They ask you leading questions that show they care about who you are and what you're doing. And then the second thing I think when it comes to leaders is they do what they say they're going to do.
Yes.
And so if you want somebody to trust you, trust needs to be earned. And one of the ways that you can earn it is by doing what you promise. And so if you're an organisation and your organisation promises, or one of your organisation's values is equality, or is everybody's treated equally, then how do you respond as an organisation to something like bullying?
Yeah.
Or sexist behaviour? Do you reward the people who have those behaviours, or do you appropriately punish them?
Yeah. Because or educate, communicate, all of those things.
Yep. And if you, as an organisation, if you've got policies and processes, policies in particular, what happens when somebody breaches that policy? Do you just pretend it didn't happen, or do you own it?
Yeah.
And is there a consequence for that person?
Yeah.
So there's some of the things that help earn trust, both of individuals and organisations.
I also think that when I meet people, it's always lovely when they are the same in front of the curtain as behind the curtain.
Yep.
That is always lovely when there's that authenticity, because we've all experienced times where it's not necessarily been that.
Exactly. And think about as well, you know, when you meet somebody, are they, as you've just said, are they the same person behind the curtain as they are in front of the curtain? And how do they believe they're seen? So a big part of being self-aware is knowing how other people perceive you. And so it's not only how you see yourself, it's do other people see you in the same way that you see yourself? And if they do, then that's great. And if they don't, then that's a really big problem.
Oh gosh, Mel, that's a whole tin of worms, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is a really interesting thing. Like in terms of self-awareness, thinking about that, does your self align with what others see and think as do you see and think? Gosh,
and I worked with one man. Unsurprisingly, this particular man headed up this project team where we didn't find out about our contracts until a few days before they expired, but he believed he was God's gift. What he didn't realise is that people were scared of him and most people couldn't stand him. He was also somebody who his leadership team buffered the information that they gave him, because if he believed there was bad news, he would just lose his shit. And so bad news was not presented as bad news because they were fearful of what his response would be. And so think about how do you and if you're not sure how people see you, then ask them. You could, just say to people who you trust to begin with, what are 3 words that you would use to describe me? And are they 3 words that you would use to describe yourself or not? How do you, and other questions could be, or not even, you don't even need to ask other people. You can just start to be really honest with yourself and observant when you meet new people.
Yes.
How do they respond to you?
Watching the feedback, almost like the subtle feedback. This is not even spoken because it's in the little nuances that, particularly if someone's fearful of your buffer in that example and buffering bad news. Observation when that takes a really different lens. You're in yoga. If I think about yoga, we talk about being the witness a lot. Kind of witnessing the experience. To be in that place of curiosity as opposed to being offended or taking it the wrong way or totally dismissing it, but actually getting real and truthful. And watching what the reactions and those little small micro facial expressions because the truth is we do feel the energy. We do know.
We do. And I think you asked me what can people do to create a thriving, aligned and belonging culture. Well, there's 3 things. You can ask questions. You can deeply listen to the answers and not just the words that are spoken, but the words that aren't spoken. And you can observe behaviours. And so if you do those 3 things every day, ask questions, listen to the answers and observe behaviours, that will give you insight into why things are not working out in your organisation as you would like them to, or why things are going as well as they are. And it takes a level of deep insight and honesty, and it's hard. As a leader in an organisation or as a business owner of an organisation that you love, it's really hard to do these things if you haven't done them, because it requires a sense, again, a deep sense of self-awareness to get a feel for what really is happening. And you need to take those blinkers off. Stop peering through the rose-coloured glasses.
Yeah.
Mm,
It is tricky. That is really challenging because sometimes you are so close to it and
yeah,
you are so in it that that can be really, really challenging,
yeah, yeah,
but worth it. But worth
yeah,
it.
yeah. One of the things, like I do a lot of facilitation of strategy days and other workshops, and someone said to me, "Why would we bring you in? We've got somebody in house who does facilitation." And I said, "You're bringing me in because I'm an outside set of eyes.
Yeah.
I can ask the questions that no staff member can ask.
Mm.
I'll pick up, I'll observe things that you won't notice because you're too close to it."
Mm. And you need Switzerland in your
You
organization
do. You
sometimes
do.
to ask the questions and hold space for someone to answer.
Yeah. And sometimes you need that, you need that drunk uncle who says all of the really inappropriate things in your organization as an outsider
Yeah.
who doesn't have fear of what the consequences are, because you're going in sometimes to be the rabble rouser.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, in a kind, compassionate way. But when you bring an external person in, we can ask the questions because we are there to do a job and we don't have to front people up the next day.
Yeah.
And if it all goes horribly wrong, you can just say, she just was mean.
Totally. Just blame
It
it
was
on
all
me.
the facilitator's fault.
Yeah, which is great, but there will be some great information in that that
Yeah.
you get to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well worth it. Well worth having that third person in.
It
Yeah.
really is. Yeah. That's why, when there's relationship breakdowns, people see a marriage counselor or a relationship counselor or a mediator, or, before you go to court, for any reason, you want to go to a mediator, and a facilitator can be that mediation in
Yeah.
some way, like that
Yeah.
third party that can just see different things.
Yeah, and help shift the energy because sometimes you do feel like you're roadblock and you can't possibly
Yeah.
see that person's, and sometimes it just needs to be almost like translated
Yeah.
in a different words or a different way or feel into it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
well worth it.
Yeah.
Now, your book, Mel, Fully Connected, is an Amazon bestseller, as I mentioned. Can you share a couple of the most impactful strategies from your book that leaders can start implementing right away to take back the ownership of their lives?
Yeah, I think there's three things. The first thing is you need to know what's important to you. What are your core priorities in life? And your life right now? So knowing your values is obviously really important, but what are the most important things to you right now in life? Is it your health? Is it money? Is it your relationships with your kids? Is it your job? Is it a sense of community? Is it caring for your parents? Could be any number of things, but what is the single most important thing in your life right now? And are you doing what is required to be able to spend time, energy, and attention with that thing?
Mm.
And then the second thing is having healthy boundaries. And if you're not spending time on energy and attention on your number one priority, it's probably because you don't have healthy boundaries in place. So identify, where do you need to be creating some healthy boundaries? Who do you need to be communicating them to? And how do you keep them?
Mm.
And how long do you need to keep them? Because not all boundaries need to be there forever.
Yeah.
So I've got a really clear boundary around when I have meetings, and I won't need that boundary when I don't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a boundary. That's a Monday to Friday boundary.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, it's a 7-day-a-week boundary because I don't do meetings on the weekends, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is do something every day that brings you joy.
Mm.
Because as we said at the beginning, when you're happy, that brings an energy that brings people with you.
Yeah.
And makes people want to be with you and around you and in your orbit. And when you're a leader, what you want is for people to follow you. And when you bring joy and a happy energy, people are going to want to follow you. And that means that they're going to want to work for you. They'll want to do their best for you. They'll want to buy from you. They'll want to volunteer with you. They'll want to give you money.
Mm.
They'll do more things for you that you want them to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they'll trust you more as well.
Yeah. And you're leading by example too. If you can look after yourself, it says that I value my happiness and I also value yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. and I expect you to value yours. Leading by example.
Yeah. Brilliant. And I do like the what do you want? Like that is a big question that we have to ask ourselves over and over again.
Yeah.
What do you want?
And your priorities will change.
Yes.
There's been different times of my life when my priorities have been, well, when I was in my early 30s, I wanted to buy a house. And so my top priority for about 18 months was working enough to save enough money to have a deposit to buy a house.
Yeah.
And that meant that I didn't go out. I didn't buy stuff. I took my lunch to work. I actively sought promotion because I needed to earn more money.
Yeah.
And I saved and saved and saved.
Yeah. And then now this stage of life, priority is different.
Now my priority is, I'm in my early 50s. Oh, my God, I'm nearly in my mid-50s. 54, does that make me mid? I'm just in denial about that.
Makes you amazing.
Yes, it does. Thank you. More amazing. So now I'm looking at, from a financial perspective, what does retirement look like? And how many more years do I have to work versus how many more years do I want to work?
Yes.
And so what does that look like? Yeah.
Great conversations to have, isn't it? And that is, planning and taking your life into your own hands. And then there's no resentment because you thought about it and you planned. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But, if your priorities are your kids and you've got small kids, they won't be small for long. And so I don't have children, but I would assume that your children are always a priority regardless of how old they are. But at different stages in life, they need more from you and then they need different things from you.
Yeah.
So how do you fit that into your world when your kids are under the age of 5 compared to when they're teenagers, compared to when they're in their 30s?
Yeah.
Where does that sit on your priority list in terms of how much time, energy, and attention you're giving them versus the other things that are important in your world?
Yeah. And like you said, doing something every day that makes you happy.
Oh,
that's, because it can't just be
overestimate that.
Yeah, because it can't just be 4 weeks a year where you take a holiday, or maybe that 4 weeks may not even be a holiday. It's only 1 week a year holiday, but we cannot live our life for that annual leave or when we actually decide to have a break. It has to be all those fun little things that we do daily.
Yeah. And, doing something every day that gives you joy doesn't need to be the same thing every day, or it could be. It doesn't need to take a long time. It doesn't need to be expensive. The two things that I love to do every day that give me the most pleasure are going for a walk on the beach with my husband and reading a book for pleasure. And I do one, if not both of those things every day.
Yeah. And like you say, it doesn't have to cost you money, or it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be time, a huge amount of time. No. It just needs to be a priority.
Yeah. And sometimes, reading is probably the thing I love to do the most on my own. And I go to bed early enough every night so that I can read for half an hour. And if I'm having a really bad day for whatever reason, particularly during COVID when things were a bit fraught on lots of levels, I would sometimes get through the day thinking at 9 o'clock I'll be in bed with a book. And if it was a really bad day, it might be 7:30.
Yeah, I'll be in bed.
And I'd have an extra hour or two.
Yes. But that's the sweetness of life, isn't it? Knowing what you love, having a beautiful little hobby with a bit of escapism and just for the pure joy of it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So wonderful. Mel, it has been an absolute pleasure and delight to chat as always. Thank you for sharing around leadership and how to be a better leader, as well as the perimenopause and menopause, that communication thing. I think that's been a big theme of our chat today, is definitely that communication and self-awareness, which is, and it's a practice, I feel, and it has levels.
It is.
Keep communicating. And I think too, thinking through that, not everyone's verbal. It can be written, it can be spoken, whatever way, but keep communicating. That's, the tip of the day, huh?
And communication as well. It's not just what you say, it's what you do. It's your body language, it's your facial expressions. I was on a Zoom call last year and a friend of mine was on the call as well, and we hung up and she rang me. And there were about 12 of us on the call. And she said to me, you really don't like this particular person who was on the call as well, do you? And I said, oh, my God, I really don't. But how did you know that? I tried so hard to not show my feelings on my face. And she said, that's how I knew, because you were just a blank slate whenever she was on the screen. Whereas normally you're incredibly expressive.
So yeah, there you go.
Okay, well, you do know me well.
Yeah. So future no blank face, a little
That's
smile on your face. Love it. Thank you, darling Mel. Thanks for your pearls of wisdom today. And I'm sure everyone will get something out of it. And I'll put the link in for the Australasian
Menopause Society.
Menopause Society. Menopause, that will be helpful if anyone wants to find a health practitioner in their area. And I'll put the link to your book. If anyone wants to get your gorgeous book and have a read, they can.
Oh, thanks so much. And I have a checklist around boundaries as well. So I'll give you the link for that. If you're trying to figure out how to create healthy boundaries, just download the checklist and it will give you a few ways, suggestions.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mel. And I'll put your social links there and people can go and like and follow.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Emma.
Thanks, Mel. Have you checked out my latest creation? Yes, I am a published author. I've written a book. 365 Days of Morning Magic. Manifest a life you love with clarity, calm, and joy. This little book is a daily guide that helps you set your intentions. I also invite you to join my free group, 21 Minutes of Morning Magic, on Facebook, where I gather regularly with you all and we go through a beautiful little process of yoga, some flowetry, setting an intention for the day. So if you'd love to be part of that, click the link below and I hope you enjoy this beautiful little book.